Picture this. Ian Bremmer, the eminent political scientist, unveils his annual Top Risks Report for 2024. Now, this isn't just some list of potential hazards. It's a comprehensive examination of the world's most significant threats and opportunities. Bremmer warns us against falling prey to sensationalism, urging us to focus on real issues. He paints a picture of a world in a geopolitical recession, bracing against the winds of major wars without the safety nets of effective responses, containment, or diplomacy. We're talking culture wars and cancel culture, ramping up as formidable adversaries for companies. El Niño, the climate phenomenon, is returning. Fiercer, more dangerous, ready to court disaster for regions ill-equipped to handle sudden climate stresses. Inflation is on the rise, hemming in central bankers and threatening underperformance in the United States, among other countries. Then there's the scramble for critical minerals, the fight for resources in a world shifting to post-carbon energy. China, a global powerhouse, is showing no signs of recovery, and its partial rebound might just ripple across the global economy. Countries we've labeled as rogue states are banding together, creating a potential threat to international stability. The rapid advancement of artificial intelligence is outpacing our ability to control it, leaving a gap for misuse and cyber threats. But wait, there's more. Ukraine is struggling to reclaim occupied territory, and the Middle East teeters on the brink of further conflict. The United States, polarized and mistrustful of its own institutions, faces a risk of interference in its upcoming elections. Amidst all these risks, though, Bremmer doesn't leave us without a glimmer of hope. He points towards the economic potential of AI, stable elections in other countries, improved US-China relations, and other positive developments. But the most intriguing part of it all is, well, you'll find out in just a moment. What's up, my amazing and curious folks? Are you ready to unravel today's mysteries together? I'm your host, Cesar Chagas, and joining me as always is the insightful and vivacious Sonia.
Hi everyone, so excited to dive into today's topic with you all.
Remember folks, if you're loving our daily explorations, do subscribe to the Curiosity Wonderland and hit that bell icon so you won't miss out on any of our episodes. We're here every day at 10, 14, and 20 hours, ready to satisfy your curiosity. Stay tuned, for we've got an incredible curiosity to share with you today. You won't believe it. Ian Bremmer has been delivering his insightful Top Risks Report for over 15 years now. The primary goal here is to systematically outline how we should approach the world's most significant threats and opportunities in any given year. This report is a beacon of reality in an ocean of sensationalism. Bremmer encourages us to focus on what truly matters for global success, rather than getting lost in the maze of clickbait news. He warns us that we are in the midst of a geopolitical recession, heading straight into the teeth of major wars and confrontations without a clear, effective response, containment, or useful diplomacy.
You know, Cesar Chagas, hearing about these top risks reminds me of a childhood memory. When I was about 10 years old, I remember my family and I used to play this board game. The objective was simple: navigate this world map, avoid hazards, and reach the end. And there was this one card, the Storm card. Whenever someone pulled it, we'd all groan because it would throw our game plans into disarray. It was unpredictable, and it could change the outcome of the game. And now, as an adult, observing the real world, I see how our global situation resembles that game. We're all trying to navigate this world, and there are these storm cards, these unexpected risks that we don't always see coming. Whether it's culture wars, climate change, inflation, or the race for resources, these are our real-life storm cards. We have to adapt, rethink our strategies, and keep moving forward, just like in the game.
That's a great analogy, Sonia. It indeed feels like we're in the middle of an intense board game, trying to outmaneuver these risks. And Bremmer's report, quite like that game, is giving us a roadmap, an organizing principle to make sense of it all. Despite these challenging times, these reports help us to focus on the issues that matter and not get lost in the daily noise.
Exactly. In the end, it all comes down to how well we react and adapt to these storm cards, these risks. We can't eliminate them, but we can learn to navigate through them, just like in the game. And I believe that's why this report and our conversations around it are so critical.
So Bremmer goes on to say that we're in a period of geopolitical recession, a state of GZERO, as he calls it. He argues that we're facing a power vacuum, with the United States no longer acting as the global policeman, the architect of global trade, or the cheerleader for global values. And he suggests that no other country or group of countries seems ready or willing to fill that void. This lack of leadership is causing a lot of conflict and erosion of institutions we've almost taken for granted.
What does this GZERO state really mean? Can you provide some examples?
Sure, think of it as a game of chess where there's no clear leader, no king or queen dictating the moves. Every player is for themselves, and the gameplay is unpredictable. In real terms, this could mean international trade disputes escalating without a clear mediator, or perhaps conflicts arising over resources like oil and water with no unified global response. It's a state of every nation for itself, which can lead to confusion, conflict, and instability.
And how does this geopolitical recession tie into the top risks of 2024?
Well, these geopolitical changes are setting the stage for the risks that we're facing. For example, Bremmer talks about the number 10 risk as risky business. It's about culture wars from both left and right, making it difficult for companies that have exposure to the US market to effectively operate in both red and blue environments.
Can you give me an example of that?
Absolutely. Imagine a tech company that prides itself on its progressive values. It may face backlash in conservative regions, potentially limiting its market. On the flip side, a company seen as having conservative values might struggle to attract diverse talent in more liberal areas. The polarization in today's world is making it increasingly difficult for businesses to navigate successfully. Let's dive deeper into these risks. The number 9 risk is El Niño is back. El Niño is a regular climate event, but now its impact is amplified against the backdrop of climate change.
So, is the danger of El Niño about the weather event itself, or the incapability of nations to deal with it?
It's a bit of both. The event itself is becoming more hazardous due to global warming. But the real risk is that many of the nations most likely to be affected, particularly in Latin America, southern sub-Saharan Africa, and the Indo-Pacific, are ill-equipped to handle this crisis.
So what can these nations do?
They need to recognize that these aren't isolated crises, but a new normal. They need to prepare for it by setting aside funds, building infrastructure, and investing in crisis response systems.
And what about the number 8 risk you mentioned?
The number 8 risk, no room for error, refers to the pervasive global inflation shock that began in 2021. Central bankers are walking a tightrope. They have to manage interest rates and inflation while dealing with geopolitical instability and market dislocations.
So, the roller coaster ride is not over yet?
Not by a long shot. The repercussions of the pandemic and geopolitical instability are still playing out, and we're going to have to navigate through these winds of change. That's the crux of Bremmer's report. So moving on to the number 7 risk, which is the fight for critical minerals. As the world transitions away from fossil fuels to more sustainable energy sources, there's a growing demand for certain minerals, and this demand is creating political opportunities for disruption.
So, what's behind this fight for critical minerals?
The demand for these minerals is driven by new technologies and the push towards a post-carbon economy. Countries like China, which have heavily invested in these technologies, and countries in the global south, rich in these minerals, are at the center of this fight.
And how is this impacting the geopolitical landscape?
This shift is causing a sort of trade war. For instance, the Chinese could retaliate against US export controls on semiconductors and cloud computing by restricting access to technologies they dominate, like electric vehicles and batteries.
And what about the countries that are rich in these minerals?
Countries rich in these minerals, especially those in sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America, are leveraging their resources for domestic development and technology advancement. This means they're requiring more investment from companies looking to extract these minerals, which raises the costs.
Sounds like it's not just about who has the minerals, but how they use this leverage.
Exactly. It's a complex issue, and it's definitely going to have an impact on the global economy, especially for developed countries implementing carbon border adjustment mechanisms. This could hurt developing countries who struggle to reduce their carbon footprint in supply chains and exports. We're in a new age of geopolitical strategy and economic planning, and it's all interconnected. Now let's move to risk number 6, which is no China recovery. Xi Jinping's focus on national security and political stability has superseded the importance of economic growth.
How does that impact China's economy?
With China facing a significant structural slowdown, Jinping's response is rather incremental and not a dynamic fundamental reform. This means that the animal spirits driving Chinese consumption sentiment aren't likely to rebound much.
And how does that affect the global economy?
It could drag down the global economic rebound, as China's economic stagnation could lead to low external demand for their goods and keep real estate weak.
So what's the number 5 risk?
The number 5 risk is the axis of rogues. Russia has become a rogue state following the invasion of Ukraine, with its assets frozen by the US, Japan, and Europe, and facing multiple rounds of sanctions.
What does this mean for Russia?
Russia is isolated, its allies are limited, and its economic and diplomatic ties with the West are severed. Militarily, China and India can be considered allies, but the support for Russia's military efforts seems to be from North Korea and Iran, 2 other rogue states. So we have 3 rogue states, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, increasingly working together, and all of them benefiting from chaos. They're attempting to undermine the stability of the international order, which increases the risk of things going wrong.
Could you give us an example of what kind of chaos they could cause?
Certainly. For instance, consider a scenario where these rogue states use their combined influence to disrupt international trade agreements or coordinate cyber attacks on critical infrastructures of Western nations. The resulting chaos would strain global relations and possibly lead to conflict. But there's another piece to consider: America's dangerous friends, Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan. These countries are important allies of the US, but their leaders are increasingly risk-acceptant, and they're driving global risk.
Can you give some examples to illustrate this point better?
Of course. For instance, let's take Bibi Netanyahu in Israel. He's facing potential jail time after his term, which could make him more likely to take aggressive actions to retain power. Then there's Ukraine's President Zelensky, who is desperate for support and could potentially make risky decisions to ensure his nation's survival. And William Lai, who is running for president in Taiwan, could drive greater tension between the US and China due to his orientation towards Taiwan's autonomy. Moving on to risk number 4, we have ungoverned AI. While AI has the potential to unlock unprecedented opportunities and drive a new wave of globalization, its rapid advancement is outpacing our ability to govern it, leading to potential negative externalities.
Could you provide an example of what these negative externalities might look like?
Sure. Imagine an AI system operating a power grid. If the system were hacked or malfunctioned due to lack of proper governance and oversight, it could lead to widespread blackouts, affecting millions of people and causing significant economic damage. Proper governance is needed to prevent such scenarios. There's a level of inertia aligned with the technological speed of AI. It's advancing 3 times faster than Moore's Law, which doubled every 18 months. The next generation AI models, like GPT-5, which is due to be released soon, make the previous ones seem like child's toys.
What does that mean for us?
It means that these advanced tools will be in the hands of numerous governments, institutions, and individuals. It's not like nuclear weapons, where you can limit the proliferation of the most advanced models. That's not going to happen here.
That sounds worrisome.
Indeed. Some of these AI models will be in the hands of corporations that don't care about the secondary and tertiary effects on populations. Others might fall into the hands of bad actors, criminals, and terrorists. They could use AI for harmful purposes, such as creating new weapons, deploying AI for disinformation on a scale we've never seen before, or launching massive cyber attacks.
What's next on the list of risks?
Risk number 3 is partitioned Ukraine. I want to be clear, this is not a preference, but a reflection of the current reality. The ability for Ukraine to get the military support they would need to retake the 18% of their territory that Russia still illegally occupies seems virtually impossible to imagine. We're seeing a change in the trajectory of the war between Russia and Ukraine. The United States has become much more politicized on this issue, and countries in Europe are having a harder time providing economic support. The result? President Zelensky becomes more vulnerable and desperate. On the other side, Putin, with his patience and, dare I say, tenacity, hopes to just wait it out and capitalize on the world's fatigue.
It reminds me of a game of chess I played as a kid. I was at a friend's house, and we got into this marathon game. My friend had a knack for the game, and it felt like he was just waiting for me to get tired and make a mistake.
A pertinent analogy. Much like that chess game, the international stage is not about rapid moves but strategic patience, and Putin plays a similar game, waiting for the right moment to make his move. But let's remember, Russia won't necessarily win here. Even if they manage to split Ukraine, they will still be a rogue state, dealing with an expanded NATO and sanctions. The real question will be where the lines of partition lie, and how much of Ukraine will still be vulnerable to Russian attacks.
And the solution could be giving Ukraine hard and fast security guarantees, like integration into NATO and the EU?
Exactly. There's still a window for that in 2024, but it's fast narrowing. Moving on to the next risk, Middle East on the brink. This risk took many by surprise. Despite breakthroughs like the Abraham Accords and the Gulf Cooperation Council coming together, the issue of Palestine was largely ignored. And that came to a head with dramatic consequences in October 7th. The situation in the Middle East has been exacerbated by various factors. To start with, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's focus on his personal survival and a hardline coalition partner's desire to expand territorial access in the West Bank took attention away from Gaza and border security. This led to the worst violence against Jews we've seen since the Holocaust.
That's intense. What could happen next?
In 2024, it's hard to see the war being contained to Gaza. There are several ways it could escalate. For instance, through a northern front with Hezbollah, or the Israelis finding themselves increasingly isolated globally. There's also the fact that many Democrats in the US are becoming more sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, which could impact how the situation unfolds.
It sounds like it could easily spiral out of control.
Exactly. Another potential catalyst for escalation is the Houthi group in Yemen, who continue to launch attacks against shipping in the United States. This is likely to provoke a response from the US, possibly leading to an expanded war. And then we have the millions of Muslims around the world, including in the US and Europe, who are becoming radicalized as a result of this violence. Some of them may turn to violence themselves, either as lone wolf attackers or by joining terrorist organizations.
What's the worst-case scenario?
The worst-case scenario would be a direct war between the United States and Iran. That could trigger a global recession, significantly impact the oil market, and have major political implications. But thankfully, we are several steps away from that happening. However, we can't ignore the fact that we are likely to see a rise in Middle East instability over the coming months. And the top risk for 2024 is the United States versus itself. It's a major confrontation where the two sides see each other as existential adversaries and lack a basic understanding of the facts and what they're fighting over. The tension between different factions isn't just a global issue. It's very much a problem in the United States right now. Sadly, it's the only advanced democracy in the world that is struggling to ensure a free and fair, peaceful transition of power through an election.
That's a troubling thought. Are the trust levels in the political institutions decreasing?
Yes, trust in all major political institutions is decreasing year after year. This is happening in the middle of an election with two deeply unpopular leaders, one of whom has openly stated he is not prepared to accept the free and fair outcomes of an election. In any well-functioning democracy, this would be the top issue to discuss.
What happens when Trump gets the nomination for the Republican Party?
If Trump gets the Republican nomination, which is highly likely, he will become significantly more powerful. All the Republicans in leadership will declare loyalty to him. he'll have the support of right-wing media and a lot of money to run his campaign. This means his policies, such as cutting off Ukraine, threatening Iran, and his treatment of Muslims, will not just be ideas by a presidential candidate, but the policies of half of the US political spectrum. This could lead to a lot of international risk. Furthermore, there's so much more at stake for these leaders in this election. If Biden loses, he and many of his closest advisors believe they would face legal jeopardy themselves, as Trump could politicize the IRS, the Department of Justice, and the FBI against his opponents.
And if Biden wins?
If Biden wins, Trump faces potential jail time. This means he could do everything in his power to rally his supporters to interfere with the election outcome and undermine it. The stakes are extremely high. The presence of chaos actors around the world that oppose the United States makes the US election an attractive, soft homeland security target that's hard for the Americans to defend. The leaders of the US intelligence community, in fact, have expressed more worry about this than China, Russia, or other major foreign policy national security threats.
That's certainly alarming. So are there any optimistic points?
Yes, there are. Firstly, despite artificial intelligence being listed as a risk, I believe that its economic upside is very significant. Unlike other new technologies that pose a threat to powerful actors, AI can be utilized by all incumbents to improve efficiency and productivity. This leads to more investment from every sector, making me very excited about the future of AI.
That's a welcome silver lining.
Secondly, although the US election poses significant geopolitical problems, there are other elections around the world that appear to be quite stable. Mexico, for example, where Claudia Sheinbaum, who is business-savvy, technocratic, and a former climate scientist, is likely to win, which would be a big win for an economy doing well. Similarly, in India, which is the most populous democracy in the world, Modi has a 75% approval rating and will probably win his next term easily. He'll be able to implement major economic reforms that matter. This is not only good for growth, but also for India's unique position in leading the global south and acting as a bridge to the west. Let's consider India again. If it were run by South Africa's ANC, which is much more anti-West and pro-China, geopolitics would feel like two competing blocs. But that's not what we have right now.
So there's a lot of overlap?
Absolutely. The BRICS are not oppositional to the G7. India is a very big part of that, which is often underappreciated.
What about the European Union?
Despite many unpopular leaders inside Europe dealing with a populist upsurge, the European Union parliamentary elections will likely return the same basic party formation as we've had for the last 5 years. Stability there is crucial.
And Russia?
The Russian election won't be democratic. It's going to be Putin, Putin, or Putin. But it's not likely to result in a lot of instability.
And the US-China relationship?
That's the most important geopolitical relationship in the world. For the last 3 years, it's been a relationship of managed decline. But this year, the focus will be on management, with both countries trying to avoid a crisis.
What are the reasons behind it?
In the US, it's an election year. They're dealing with issues in the Middle East and with Russia, Ukraine. As for China, their economy is underperforming, making it a bad time for Xi Jinping to have a big fight with either the Americans or their allies.
So can we expect better engagement?
Yes, there will be significantly more high-level engagement between the two countries. We'll still see tensions, of course, particularly after the Taiwanese election, in the South China Sea, and in technology, but the effort to contain and manage the fight will be far greater than in previous years. So despite the various geopolitical tensions and issues we've discussed, there is a major silver lining for 2024. The enhanced engagement between the US and China, the significant economic upside of AI, and the stability in various global elections all point to a promising direction. And that's something we all can look forward to.
Absolutely. It's essential not to lose sight of these positives, even in the face of potential challenges. It's a reminder that even in complexity, there can be growth and progress.
Well said. And that's why it's so crucial always to keep an open mind and a balanced perspective when looking at global affairs. Well, we've covered quite a range of topics today, haven't we? From the increasing politicization of businesses, the impact of climate change, global inflation shocks, and the demand for critical minerals, to China's economic slowdown, the rogue alliance of Russia, North Korea, and Iran, the challenges of AI governance, the escalating Middle East conflict, and the polarization of U.S. politics. All these are major global risks for the year 1924. But let's not forget the silver lining: the economic potential of AI, stable elections, and improved U.S.-China engagement, among others. After all, in the words of Ian Bremmer, it's all about focusing on real issues and not succumbing to sensationalism.
Absolutely. And that's a lesson we can all take to heart, not just in geopolitics, but in our daily lives too. So, folks, if you enjoyed this deep dive into the top risks and opportunities of 2024, be sure to blast that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and get your friends in on the conversation by sharing this episode.
Yes, we'd love to hear your take on these issues. Thanks for joining us on this journey today. Stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, keep thinking big.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, take care and keep those minds open. Goodbye.
This insightful analysis comes from an article titled 10 Biggest World Threats of 2024, ranked by Ian Bremmer, published on the Big Think site on January 17, 2024. If you're interested in exploring more, you can find the full URL in the video description. And now we sign off. Until next time.